So it's paused at the moment. No, now you've unpaused.
Ah, okay. So if I just
record, and I'm going to, let's see whether we can get onto Facebook. This will be an interesting one. So where are we going? Page that we manage. Jewish small communities next. And that's just booting up now. Oh, looking good. Fantastic. I think we're all ready to go.
Yeah, so a lot of it. Yeah, no, we've got people get some boats. Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
Oh,
yes, now I can. Hello.
Fantastic. Right. Okie dokie. I think that's all ready to go. Let's see. Great. Okay. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Carter, maybe you could just monitor the JSCN Facebook page just to see whether we're actually coming through on there. Is that doing it? Yeah, cool. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ed Horwich. I am Director of Jewish Small Communities Network, as many of you know. Welcome to those who it's the first time you met me. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces from all over the country. This morning, we've got Rebecca Taylor, who is editor of Jewish Renaissance, the magazine, which charts Jewish life and Jewish heritage quite a lot. And we're going to be talking about local stories, which Jewish Renaissance just happens to have done recently. And just going to make sure everybody's muted. Carter, can you sort of go around just muting everybody? Great. So welcome to those people I've not met before. It's lovely to have you here. If you want to put things in the chat, please do. Tell us where you're from if it's your first time here. But I can see that we've got people from Belfast, from Tunbridge Wells, from Cardiff, from Hull, from Liverpool, from Bedfordshire, and all over the place. So it's great to have you for our first event in the Connecting Small Histories Reading Festival, which is going on throughout August, every Monday. I think most Mondays we've got two events, one in the morning and one in the evening, and there's another event this evening with Pam Fox. But it's a great kickoff. We're going to be talking about lots of our communities with Rebecca Taylor, and I think you're going to be showing us some things. So Rebecca, welcome, and it's lovely to have Jewish Renaissance here.
Hello Ed, and hello to everybody. Thank you all for joining us today from all over the country and all over the world in some cases. So JR is, as Ed said, it's a culture magazine. We cover arts, theatre, music, drama, comedy, dance that has a Jewish connection. But what we also do every issue is have a section called Passport, and that chooses a community around the world. So it could be a city, a country, a region, and we do an in-depth analysis of the Jewish community there. So we look at the culture, the history, and we speak to the current day community and find out, sort of take the temperature, as it were, about the community today. And the way I choose these different places comes down to lots of different things, but I try and keep it quite timely. I keep it current, what's in the news, either for the Jewish world or for the wider world. We were going to be covering Tokyo, for example, this summer to tie in with the Olympics, but sadly, we're not covering Tokyo because of coronavirus. We'll do it next year. So we try and give it a sort of timely flavour. Past places we've covered internationally are Venice, when we were marking the 500th anniversary of the world's first ghetto, which started in Venice. But nearer to home, we also do a similar thing. So our Brighton issue a few years ago was to tie into the 250th anniversary of the city's first Jewish resident there. And this year, our recent issues have covered the north of England. So why the north? Well, back in December, if we can remember back then, when it feels a very long time ago, during the general election, the north of England was very much top of the agenda. It was where there was a lot of focus. People were talking about how places can be renewed in the north. There was a lot of thinking about what was going on in the north of England. And I just wondered, what was the perspective of the Jewish communities in the north of England? So that's what I decided to look at for our spring and summer issues. And that's what I'll be talking a bit about today, and as well as a few other places that we've covered. So I'll sort of take you on a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the places we've covered, but what I'd really like is to hear from you about where you are and what you'd like covered yourselves, what you think could be included. I'd be really interested to hear that. I'm on holiday in Somerset at the moment, and we haven't actually covered the southwest of England. So if there's anyone out there from the southwest region, let me know. I'd be happy to hear more about that. And while I'm here, maybe even have a look around. So I'm really keen to hear from you. But maybe let's kick off with our current issue. And I'm just going to go into screen share now so you can see some of the images from our current issue. Let's just get this up. If you give me a minute. Can people see the screen?
No, we've just got your name, so you're not currently sharing.
Oh dear. Okay, let me go back into this. Now, when I've set this up at home, it's gone perfectly. Right, let's just have it. So now what let's just go back into.
No, not at the moment.
1 second. Okay, let's try again. Thank you, Miriam, for holding up the picture while we're waiting. It usually goes straight into my screen, and it's not going into my screen. Just give me 1 second. I will try and set it up a different way.
Rebecca, there can be a slight delay. I would just give it a second. There can be a delay.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
It's just when I'm pressing on screen share, it's not coming up with it's not coming up with.
It's not coming up with the options.
With screen, with the screen, it's just saying. Let me just try the Dropbox, and I can try and get into it that way.
Has Ed made you a presenter?
Yes, yes. Yeah, she's got the right privileges. Yeah.
Let's just try this.
While Rebecca's doing that, oops, there we go. Magic words. Although
No,
nothing's up there at the minute. You are sharing. Well, I'll just carry on saying that if you go to our bookshelf on the JSCN website, Jewish Renaissance have very kindly given us access to the sections that Rebecca's talking about on the northern communities, and you can read them for free. It's there's two links. Just go to jscn.org.uk/bookshelf, and you can access them from there.
This is very frustrating. Why is this not giving me the screen share?
Do you want to? Are you going to those sections in the magazine, Rebecca?
Yes, I am.
Or maybe I can do it from here.
I had it all set up beautifully. All right, let me just start again. Okay. I can't see why this is not coming up with my slides.
Right. I shall just hang on. Let me just go here to bookshelf. And so April or July?
Okay, so we're going to start off with the July issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if we can do this.
Okay, I'll just hold it up to the screen. That's until I can. Let me just try one more time.
How about that? Can everybody see?
That's fantastic. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it that way. Thank you very much, Ed. Okay, so we're starting off. If you can just show the cover of the July issue.
I'm not sure that it actually takes me there. It only takes me to the inside section.
Okay. Well, I will hold up the cover of the July issue for those who haven't seen it. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. So our July issue covered the north of England, and we started off looking at the northwest. And if you can just move the page along to page 31, Ed. That's it. So there are many things that surprised me about the north of England, but one of the things that really surprised me was on any night of the week in places like Lancaster and Morecambe, in small community centres, you could find the place buzzing. You can find the place buzzing with klezmer music, with Jewish music. There is a huge Jewish music scene in the Northwest, which I had no idea about. So apart from Kles North in Derbyshire, there are klezmer classes and klezmer workshops. There are bands all over the region, bands such as the Balkanics and Svei. There are small music classes teaching klezmer and Jewish music. Heron's Flight is one. And in this picture, you can see one of the musicians, Jane Lawrence, who's playing in the lakes, literally in the lakes. And it's really a very buzzing and lively music scene. And while I've got this page open, actually, if you look at the page opposite, we also took a look at Southport, and that was another surprise, because who would have imagined at this very genteel, very, very English seaside town, there was a whole community that had, some of the members of the community have originally come from many other places from around the world, and ended up coming to Southport. And one of the things that we found out from a wonderful article by John Cowell, who might be with us today, I'm not sure if he's there,
No, not John's not in today. Unfortunately,
Okay,
he had to pull out at the last minute.
that's okay. Yes, so Southport was a centre for many of the Sephardim community who had arrived in Southport from about 1890. And lots of them had come from Manchester, where they had set up businesses in the textile and in the shipping industries, made money there, and then wanting a bit of cleaner air, decided to move out of the heavy industrial centre and move to Southport for the bracing sea air and a home on the coast. So that was something which I was certainly surprised to find out about. And as I say, that piece was written for us by John Cowell, and his book called Philanthropy, Consensus and Bruegess tells us all about the story of Southport's community. And it's a remarkable book. It's full of the most amazing detail. He's gone into synagogue administrative archives. He's looked at minutes of meetings. It's a very detailed book. So if you're interested in that sort of local history, I recommend that book. So other things that surprised me in the area were Sheffield. So Ed, if you wouldn't mind just looking at our Sheffield feature on page 26. If you can move us there, thank you. So in Sheffield, this was a small community, and again, as we often found in all the communities that I cover, it's a really common story, a common thread, is that the Jewish community becomes integrated and assimilated to a certain extent while retaining their traditions, retaining their own community and practices, but they are very involved in the civic life of all the communities I've covered across the UK. And that's a really striking factor, that they take part in as councillors, as mayors, as heads of business factions. They're very involved in the civic and wider community. So in Sheffield, the small community really punches above its weight. Over a number of years, members took on prominent civic positions. There were 2 Lord Mayors of the city, presidents of the Chamber of Commerce, chairmen of charities and commercial bodies. And there's a lovely anecdote in this piece by Judy Simons, which I'd like to share with you, which just made me chuckle. And she says that they were involved in these bodies, not least the kosher butcher, A.B. Silver, who to everybody's amusement became president of the Sheffield Pork Butchers Association in the 1950s, which really made me laugh. So there you find this in all of the stories about these places we cover. The other thing that I was very interested in was that there's a lot of historical archiving and a lot of interest in uncovering unknown histories, the unknown Jewish histories of the area. And one of the things that interested me was that there is a state-of-the-art archaeology dig going on in the Lake District. So many of you might know the story of the Windermere children, those children, about 300 children, who were brought over by the British authorities after the Second World War from Europe, often from concentration camps. And some of them were brought over by the British, and they were taken to an estate called Calgarth Estate up in the Lake District. And it was hoped that when they were based there for a temporary time, a year or so, that it might help them recover a little and start to find some way of moving forward. So Trevor Avery, who is the director of the Lake District Holocaust Project, has for many years been uncovering the history of that time and what happened then, that refugee history. And the latest part of this, which I didn't know about while I'd heard of the Windermere children, and many of you might have seen in January, the BBC drama, which very beautifully and movingly showed that story. Well, he told me about this other interesting project. So what is being done is there is an archaeological dig on the site of the estate where the children lived. It's, as I say, it's the Calgarth estate, and it's, since the time that the children were there, it's been demolished. A school has been built on it. It's now a school. But there is now this attempt to find out the story of what happened there, not just with the children who lived there, but also its history before that. And the archaeological dig is being led by an archaeologist called Caroline Sturdy-Coles. And she's very interesting as an archaeologist because she worked in Treblinka and concentration camps to uncover the history, well, the story of what happened there, but in such a very sensitive way, without disturbing the graves, without disturbing the land. And she used real state-of-the-art technology using non-invasive techniques such as ground-penetrating radar and something called magnetometry, which measures the magnetic field of an area, and she can find out what's been going on under the ground. And using that technology, one of the things they found out is that where the school's rugby field is now used to be the chalets where the children lived. And they've found some artifacts. You can see on the page, there's a little unicorn that they think was a charm bracelet, part of a charm bracelet that belonged to one of the children. And they found other artifacts on the site. So there's a lot going on to begin to uncover these hidden histories, literally hidden histories. Okay, Ed, if you just could turn the page to page 24. And this was really a remarkable story that I also had, I knew a little bit about, but really didn't know very much. So in 1932, the man who you can see in the picture at the bottom, Benny Rothman, led a mass protest. It was called a mass trespass onto Kinder Scout. Now, Kinder Scout, which some of you may know, is the Derbyshire moorland plateau. It's about 2,000 feet above sea level, a beautiful area for walking. But at that time in the 30s and up till then, it had been owned, that area, and also much of the open countryside around there was held in private hands and was not open or accessible to people who just wanted to come and get some fresh air, to escape the cities, to come out of Manchester, Sheffield, the other urban places, and get into the countryside. So Benny Rothman, he has a wonderful story in that he really led this mass trespass, as it's known, to reclaim the land from the landowners, the landed gentry of the time, and open it up to working people. So he gave an interview to the BBC in the 1980s, and I've got a quote about, he told the BBC about what happened then, which I'll read to you. So many people gathered at Kinder Scout, and he says, "We went up the bank. The person in charge of the keepers gave instructions to meet us halfway. There must have been a dozen or more brandishing their sticks and shouting, 'Get back!' And there were brief scuffles. One of the private gamekeepers was injured, and it ended up with 5 or 6 of them being arrested. The leaders, this is Benny Rothman, and others being arrested, and they were taken away and arrested, and ended up in court in Derby in July in 1932. And what was amazing today for us to hear this is the trial, the words of the trial, which the writer of this piece included. And I'm also going to read that to you because you'll see they give a real insight into the sort of struggles that were going on then and possibly are still going on now. So Ed Douglas, who wrote the piece, says, "In the judge's summing up to a jury made up primarily of local dignitaries and former army officers, including 2 brigadier generals." So Edward Acton was the judge, and he gave his summing up to this jury. And Sir Edward Acton said that they should not be prejudiced by the surnames of the accused, which sounded perhaps strange to members of the jury. So you can guess who he's referring to and what he's referring to here. That's to Benny Rothman, and the others who were accused with him were Harry Mendel, Julius Klein, and David Nussbaum. I think it kind of says it all in that sentence. They were all from Cheetham Hill in Manchester, the Jewish area of Manchester. And his point, I suppose, was that these weren't just subversives, but these were Jewish immigrant subversives. And it really speaks for itself about the sorts of prejudices that were inherent there at the time. So the group of them were imprisoned, and after they came out of prison, they immediately got back into activism and for fighting for rights to the countryside, rights for access. I didn't mention the pictures. Carter, if you can put it onto page 24. Yeah, so you can see the surge of interest. These are lots of young people in the pictures. They're scaling the embankments to get up to Kinder Scout from that trespass that went on in 1932. So there was this huge interest in reclaiming the countryside and really taking it back for everybody, not just the landed gentry. So Rothman continued this fight, and through his work, eventually in the 1950s, Britain's national parks were formed, and people were allowed access eventually to these open areas. Rothman himself is very interesting. His family were Romanian immigrants. He was from Manchester and came from a working class immigrant background. Originally, he had work in the motor trade as an errand boy. He then joined the local YMCA and started taking classes in everything, economic geography, marketing. And this brought him into contact with radicals and free thinkers, people who were interested in discussing inequalities and progressive ideas of the day. And one of those people inspired him to join the Young Communist League. And from there, he became very interested in politics. He also borrowed some money from his grandma, and he bought a bicycle. And that meant that he could then start to go out and experience the delights of the countryside on his bike. He could go up to Kinder Scout, the beautiful moorland, and he became involved in an organisation called the British Workers' Sports Federation, which represented working class people, helping them to become active and have access to the outdoors. He became secretary of its northern section. And through that, he came to understand more about how the countryside was very tightly controlled. So he has a very interesting life and went on being an activist right up until a very late age. And one of the nice anecdotes of this story is that he inspired many people to fight for these rights. And one of those he inspired was a Jewish lawyer from Leeds called Jerry Perlman. And he became an honorary solicitor for the Ramblers Association. And it was Jerry who drafted the bill that formed the basis of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act in 2000, which really finally opened up areas of land for access to walkers and ramblers. So I just thought it was a lovely historical story from the region. So maybe you can have a look at page 28. Carter, if you can just move us on to page 28. So I spoke to lots of people in the area. Some of them are here. Fiona Frank near Lancaster, who's very involved in the music side of things. Robert Pincus, who is president of St Anne's Hebrew congregation near Blackpool. Rum Samuel in Sheffield, who's involved in the Seven Hills Synagogue. A storyteller who tells traditional Yiddish stories in Sheffield, Shonely Cumbers, and Rachel Tax, who is the Vice President of Blackpool Reformed Jewish Congregation. And the sense I got from speaking to people in this region and also in the Northeast was that people had a strong sense of loyalty and felt a warmth and a commitment being involved, being part of small Jewish communities in these areas. There's a great passion for them and for them continuing. But the other feeling I got, which I'd love to hear from other people here today, is that they also felt very isolated sometimes and a little bit ignored by the main centres of Jewish life, which still are inevitably based in London, North London. And so there was a sense of frustration about that. However, what they did say was that since COVID, the situation has changed. And through Zoom, through these sorts of things that we're doing today, they now felt massively connected to communities in the UK and all over the world. But I'd like to hope that once COVID has gone, and who knows, maybe we'll continue with many of these ways of reaching out to people, but maybe there's a message there for Jewish leaders who are not based in the north or other areas where there are small communities, but just a need to take on board some of the concerns of those communities to make them feel part of a bigger UK community at times would be good. So that's our current issue. Do we want to stop there for a moment and maybe hear from people about that region?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Rebecca, thank you so much. I mean, the areas that you focused on, you know, that they'll be so familiar to many people here, but maybe sometimes not, you know, visually or, you know, in so many words connected, because although many of our community leaders, like Marilyn in Cambridge and Michael over in Belfast, sort of meet the leaders, you don't necessarily sort of like see the evidence of the communities there to read about and to see in pictures, unless you take the time to go and look online and things. I mean, we have a smattering of them in the little introductions for every community's page on Jewish Small Communities website. But it's lovely that you've really given a big platform here, and I'm so pleased that you're sharing those pages with Jewish Small Communities Network, so people can see that, and I think we'll take advantage and highlight that even more. But like you say, it'd be nice to hear from some of the people who, I'm just looking around the room to see who's in the different areas, and not so much, except perhaps over in Hull. So let's go to Anna.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm Anna from Hull. Well, you didn't get to come to our sort of Grimsby. Grimsby is exceeding.
That's next. I've got that next. Do you want me to talk about that now, actually, and then?
No, it's fine. But just to tell you that in 2017 we had a marvelous dinner. We had a whole year of events celebrating the 250th anniversary of a Jewish community in Hull, and it was attended by over 300 people that came from all parts, from Israel, from all over, to come back to their shtetl, if you like, to call it that, and to reconnect with people that they hadn't seen for years. It was a fantastic event. Sorry?
You had Maureen Lipman, I understand, as well.
She came and spoke, our own homegrown star. And I was at school with her, a few years younger, not a lot, but a few years younger than her. And she was at school with me, or I was at school with her. But it was an absolutely fantastic occasion. And like you said, there has been so much input in civic life. We've had several Lord Mayors and aldermen and councillors, leading lawyers, doctors, you know, everything. We've been fully assimilated into English life, but still connected with our roots. So that's what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you for talking about Hull. I was going to mention Hull, actually, because we got a lovely letter from Diane Barnett, I don't know if you know Diane, Anne, but she wrote to us, and this was something else I was going to say, that there's such a passion that people feel about where they, or sometimes not even they, but their parents or grandparents or even further back have come from. And I get a lot of letters with people's recollections of places or stories about their relations and ancestors. So Diane sent me a letter. We'd done for our, can you bring up do you want to bring up the April issue, Carter, if you've got access to those pages, and we can have a look at some of the northeast pages. So our first article was by Marcus Deitch on Hull.
Marcus
Deitch from Hull. He had grown up there and moved away in his, I think after he went to university. And he wrote us a very interesting piece about, well, he mentioned the 2017 celebration, but his was a reflective piece, and he talked about how people have moved away from Hull and other places in the northeast. And he did suggest something which I thought was a nice suggestion. He said maybe that Jewish leaders in London and in the South might want to think about encouraging young Jewish families who find London and the South very expensive and difficult to live in. Might there be ways of encouraging them to move to the north? He said, I'll read you a little bit out. He says, if you were to offer many of London's young Jewish professionals or families the opportunity to settle in a city where family houses in relatively affluent areas sell for well under 250,000, a choice of synagogues, a modern mikveh, beautiful countryside on your doorstep, excellent transport links, great sports and entertainment choices, you might expect them to jump at the choice. Although he says there's no kosher shops or Jewish schools, but there have been efforts to resettle people on Canvey Island and in Hertfordshire. So perhaps there could be a push to make it seem very attractive. That was one idea. But before I forget, I was going to mention Diane Barnett's letter. So she wrote in response to Marcus's article, her family arrived in Hull in the 1850s from East Prussia, and her great-great-grandfather was Abraham Moss, and he was the city's immigration officer. She had a lovely little anecdote about him. She said that his family had a boarding house on Grimsby Lane for newly arrived immigrants to stay before they went on to America or Manchester. And they had a historian called Dr. Nick Evans look at some family papers, and they found that there were some documents that the family had, that related to instances where the boarders had stolen items from Abraham, from her great-grandfather, including a coat. So I just thought this was a wonderful insight into the condition of the immigrants who had come across the sea and ended up staying in the boarding houses and were looking for a better life and were reduced to stealing coats. So yeah, really, they were full of memories and anecdotes.
Right.
Yes,
So,
did you want to...
Sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
No, there's a blue plaque on the wall down in the old town for the Harry Lazarus Hotel, where immigrants could go and get a meal. And on their short walk to the railway station, en route to Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, and then America. And there is a plaque on the wall. We'd be very happy to host you here after COVID, of course, and to give you a little bit of a tour and take you across to Grimsby as well. So if, you know, sometime in the future, if that could be arranged, it would be lovely to have you.
Thank you, Anne. I'd love to do that. And just to say, I try to go to all these places that we cover, and was about to come to Bradford, actually, which we featured in this same issue, and to try and also get to other areas in the region when COVID struck in the spring. But yeah, I often come and do a little walkabout. I don't know if you know Nigel Grizzard. He's a great historian of Jewish life in the north, and he often does walkabouts with people. He organises tours, and he was going to show me around Bradford a bit, and then I was hoping to get up to Hull and Grimsby and maybe Middlesbrough. And actually we have a little bit on Grimsby too. So if you, Carter, if you could go to the next section, which is page 18.
I'm just going to say, Rebecca, that that Nigel is actually giving one of these talks later in the month. So it's going to be talking about the Bradford area. So,
yes. Yeah. Okay.
And,
well, Nigel.
And I've just seen you've gone now to the page where, which features Middlesbrough, and Gwendolyn there is one of our regulars on the coffee break on a Tuesday morning.
Oh, right.
And tells us loads and loads of stories.
Gwen is an absolute star. Everything you want to know about Jewish life in the region, in Middlesbrough and nearby, fairly nearby, and even not so nearby, she will know. She's fantastic. She just knows everybody, and she's an amazing person, full of wonderful stories. So these were the pages about Grimsby that you mentioned, Anne, and we had John Bowers, who's the principal of Brasenose College, Oxford, who had grown up in Grimsby, and he told us a bit about the history of Grimsby and touched on Hull as well. So you can see in the top right corner the synagogue, which is the Sir Moses Montefiore Synagogue in Heneage Road. It was built in 1888, and what's special about that is its glass windows, which are absolutely stunning. And if anyone has seen, yes, Anne, you want to say?
Yeah, the three of the most stunning were provided by my late mother's family. She was from Grimsby, and they were a family called Calson, Kalson, and they were glass merchants. And that was started by my great-great-grandfather, Coleman, in 1879. And my brother, who's still with us, in Hull, is still in the glazing trade all those years later.
Really?
And the three most beautiful windows were provided by our family, the Calson windows.
Thank you for that. Lovely.
I know John, and I knew his late parents, so you know, we're very connected.
Yes, lots of connections. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is the thing, that again, the communities are small, so people know each other. And you mentioned, I mean, we spoke to Leo Solomon. Everyone knows Leo, Rudy Lever in Bradford. Lots of people know Rudy. And Gwen, I'll just quickly talk about Gwen in Middlesbrough. She was, or her family were, part of quite a large, thriving community in the 50s. And now she thinks she's the last, but well, she probably knows, knowing Gwen, she says she's the last Jewish person living in Middlesbrough. She goes to Newcastle Synagogue when she goes to synagogue. But she had a little anecdote also about life in Middlesbrough. And you can get a sense, again, the other thing, apart from this civic duty, the thing that I love about the small communities is that as soon as immigrants get there, they immediately start setting up schools and business organizations, butchers, bakers, a whole infrastructure arises. You get the Maccabee clubs, sports organizations, reading clubs, book clubs, ladies' guilds, the whole lot. You know, within a few years, suddenly you've got a whole infrastructure, always in these small places. So she remembers that Saville grocers supplied kosher food, and kosher meat was delivered from Leeds every Thursday. We even had our own shochet. I have a terrible memory of a chicken being killed in our backyard. So wherever you go, there's communal and wider infrastructure. That was yeah, very, very interesting to hear. So also I was going to have a quick look at Bradford. So you can, Carter, if you want to go on to the next spread on page 20, you can see this was a really lovely story. The photos that you can see are taken by a Muslim photographer called Nudrat Afsa, And she's a single mother. She's a carer for her daughter, who is quite ill with liver disease, and she has learning difficulties. But Nudrat became involved in the Jewish community. She had a Jewish friend, and she gave her a lift one day to the Orthodox synagogue. And the friend told her that soon the Orthodox synagogue would be closing. And Nudrat, who had had an interest in photography but didn't even own a camera, she just had cameras lent to her or borrowed them, but had long been interested in photography, she asked if she could take photos of the synagogue. So she took some photos. It was not an especially distinguished building, but they're very evocative. The photos that she took are very evocative. And then years later, she got friendly with Rudy Lever, who is the president of Bradford Reform Synagogue, and he asked, and she asked, I think they both negotiated her coming in and taking photos of inside the Reform Synagogue, which is a really beautiful 1880s, I think it was 1880s, built synagogue, in Moorish in design, very lovely and distinctive. So these are some of her photos, and she had an exhibition called Kahila, which was on in Bradford and was due to continue into the summer at Cartwright Hall in Bradford, but sadly due to COVID, it's not going on at the moment. I hope that we'll get a chance to see the photos there soon, because they're very beautiful and very evocative and atmospheric.
Rebecca,
So
we
that
actually
was
have Ruthie, who's from Bradford, who's joining us from Tel Aviv today. She's originally from Bradford. I don't know if, Ruth, you want to chip in here at all about Bradford life?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about
Are you
Bradford.
muted, Ruth?
As I said, I've not been back to Bradford for maybe 33 years, but it's in my heart that I am a Bradfordian. I was born there. I was born in my mother's house that I lived on in 18 years. The synagogue, it was just, it's part of our life. It's part of our history. I'm talking about when I say we, myself and my brother, and I have friends who still live here in Israel, but belong to the Orthodox synagogue. If we're talking about the Reform synagogue, that's where my brother had his bar mitzvah. Rudy's Levo's father taught my brother the parashah for the bar mitzvah piece. I have so many memories. It brings tears to my eyes, tears of happiness, to be able to be so proud that I can say that I remember that synagogue. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. That's lovely to hear. Yeah, there's certainly a very strong feeling of loyalty that we get from everybody, whether they're living here in London or other areas, or internationally or abroad. So thanks for that. And actually, one of the things that is interesting, we spoke about the archaeology and the dig going on in the Lake District, but I feel that maybe this is a moment where there is an interest, not just from the Jewish community, but from the wider community, to uncover and look at these histories, the hidden histories of the area. So I just wanted to highlight a few things that were going on. But Carter, if you want to move the page on to, well, actually, let's have a quick look at page 22 as we're moving through the magazine. You can see some of the people that I spoke to. So there's Joanna Edwards in Newcastle, and she and her whole family actually are involved in circus performing, hence the hoop that she's sitting in. There's Nigel at the top, Nigel Grizzard. He lives in Leeds, but is the go-to man for anything on Bradford and many other places. And then at the bottom, we spoke about Leo Solomon in Grimsby. He's a jazz musician, and he has a band. He's still playing, and you can see him at the piano there. And Alexandra Reiklina, who's the founder of Brundibar Arts Festival. I'm not sure if people know about Brundibar, but it's a fantastic music and performance festival in Newcastle. And its aim is to showcase the music of Jewish artists who were lost in the Holocaust or whose careers were affected by the Holocaust. And she puts on the most amazing programs. So I really recommend checking out Brundibar Arts Festival if you live in the north and you don't know about it, or if you at some point get a chance to go on holiday or go on a trip there. So she's very active in the Newcastle area. And then we spoke to Rudy Lever, of course, in Bradford. He talked very much about being involved in the local community, and Martin Goldberg in Darlington. So all over the place, there are communities where you least expect them, where you don't always expect them. And if you go on to page 24, Carter, we've got a nice map of some of the areas we looked at. And as I said, I was going to talk about a little bit about how local authorities are beginning to uncover some of this heritage themselves. So one place that I thought was interesting was Bishop Auckland, which was definitely one of the places we heard about back in December as being a so-called left behind area. And one idea there is to start a faith museum, and plans are in place to open this museum in 2021. And it's going to be a museum that looks about how all different faiths have shaped the British Isles, shaped the communities of the British Isles. And they're very much looking at Jewish heritage. And I think they're asking and are in contact with people. Darlington is one of them. They're asking local communities to be involved and to liaise with them over representing Jewish faith and Jewish life in the north, and I think elsewhere. In Newcastle, there's a project called the Le Havre Jewish Heritage Project, which is a collaboration between Newcastle Libraries and Tyne and Wear Archives and Museums. And that was set up in 2017 to look at the Northeast Jewish heritage, and kicked off in 2017 with a roadshow. People bought their documents and artifacts to Newcastle Council's librarians, and together they've begun to uncover some of the Jewish history of the area. They're creating an oral history archive, and they did make an exhibition called Jewish Life on Tyneside, which was on at Newcastle City Library. It's been cancelled because of COVID, but hopefully will be resurrected soon. And finally, just on this theme of a resurgence of interest in Jewish life in the area, at Durham, there's an Oriental Museum, which I certainly didn't know about. And it focuses on the art and archaeology of North Africa and Asia. And it's got a new gallery called the Silk Road. And that's exploring people who lived along Central Asia's Silk Road, and it'll be looking at the region's Jews. So it's not directly to do with the history of people in the north, but it sounds a lovely addition to cultural possibilities and cultural interest for Jewish people in the area. So those were a few places. I think we've also got someone from York with us today, so I'll mention also on that theme what's going on in York, and perhaps our York representative can tell us more. But I think that the plaque that marks the massacre at Clifford's Tower, so in 1190, 150 Jews were murdered at Clifford's Tower in York by local mobs, and that massacre has been marked for many years by just a couple of sentences at the foot of the tower. And now, in liaison and working in collaboration with the local community, there's going to be an extended history of what happened there. I think that's right. And there are also plans to make a peace park fairly near Clifford Tower.
Can I just come in here, Rebecca?
Hello.
Hi, it's Jay from
Hi,
York.
Jay.
Hi. Yes, I don't know how much things are going to go ahead. I think the plaque will go ahead. As to the Peace Park, we had a collaborative grant to the National Heritage Lottery Fund with English Heritage and York Museums Trust and a couple of other organizations, universities as well. But there was interest from the fund, from the National Lottery Heritage Fund in the application, a lot of interest, and we were just about to have a meeting, and then coronavirus hit. And they wrote to us saying they were cancelling the meeting and all of their funding is now going towards coronavirus related support for heritage. So I don't know how much things are going to go ahead in terms of marking that place of Clifford's Tower and doing the kinds of things we wanted to do as a community around York Jewish heritage. And I just want to throw in a question here for you and for everyone else, which is, you know, how coronavirus is affecting local communities and related to that funding as a result. You know, whether people's, because, you know, for example, digital meetings, you know, they require extra funding, you know, to run these digital events, or to bring people together requires different kinds of thinking, you know, which involves more time and technology and so on. So for us,
I'll chip in on that and say it's great to have you here this morning. Yes, most of the lottery funding is being redirected to being COVID focused, but that doesn't necessarily preclude everything. It might preclude some things which were, you know, considered before Corona. But there are different streams coming in and different options for getting funding. And I know that we have Ruchama here from Rothschild's Foundation this morning, who are very focused on education and looking at the changing world because of COVID and how people are interacting and how that is opening up a whole new world. So perhaps in a way, you know, the possibilities for interacting with people about the history, the legacy, heritage of York and the massacre there could actually be looked at through how do you take that out through different media, you know, because COVID's happened, but maybe that's actually taking it out to a wider world. So re-looking at applications is a key thing, and that's something we do here at JSCN. We've had to, the beginning of coronavirus, we thought that's going to stop the world, but every week since almost the beginning of coronavirus, it's given us the opportunity to have community leaders, and you're very welcome to join them, join us together every Wednesday morning, week in, week out for the last 22 or so weeks. And that's where we can talk about these issues. And indeed last week, that was the topic for our conversation, is about how do we actually communicate during Corona and what's going to happen post-Corona. So I'm sorry to butt in there, Rebecca, because that took us away a little bit from the heritage. But maybe this is a good opportunity. I'd like to ask you, Rebecca, you've put an awful lot of research and gone to an awful lot of places to populate these two issues of your magazine of Jewish Renaissance, and you've got a lot of the stories, and it's put a bit of flesh on what people kind of know a little bit about, but now, you know, it's there in black and white and it's in pictures and it's been illustrated. What was it like? You know, so a number of the people that in our event today sort of live in those places or have connections with them or have visited them, but you've come to it afresh. What was it like to come to it afresh? Was it a complete revelation? Did you not expect it? Were the things that, you know, what were the things that you took away from those visits? Personally, well, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think as I've touched on, really, the immense passion that people feel for these communities was really the overriding feeling, and it's just made me think a lot about place and how important these places, people's homes are to them, people's hometowns, home places where they've grown up, where their relatives have grown up. And I really, it's made me think, why is that important, and why is it so important? I mean, there are some places like Scarborough, other places, Preston, I think, Dewsbury, Sunderland even, where there were really rich, thriving Jewish communities, and there aren't anymore, but people still feel a very strong sense of belonging to those places. And I think it really highlighted this sense of belonging and community that came across very strongly. And also just the wealth of history and culture that was there. I spoke a little bit about in every place there being this involvement in the civic life. That really comes across as a thread. And the infrastructure. I mean, one place I was going to talk about in more detail, I don't think we're quite going to have time to do that, but Brighton, which had this amazing thriving life in the 1950s, and we had lots of anecdotes from people who used to go to Maccabi Beach, as it was known, and there were boys' clubs, there were snooker clubs, table tennis clubs. I mean, just this immense, massive organizational drive that people seem to have to set up organizations and to set up structures in their communities. It was really incredible. So yeah, it's been a revelation how much is there in each place. I mean, in tiny little places that you really wouldn't imagine. As I say, Darlington, I mean, maybe York or Bradford, Hull even, we might know a little bit about, mostly through Maureen Lippman, not unfortunately, but she is known for coming from Hull, but maybe we didn't know much more about Hull than that she came from Hull. And then I discovered this whole other side and history there, but also the very small places, Bolton, Lancaster, not so small, but yeah, there's a thriving Jewish life in Lancaster. So it's been a revelation.
Well, there is now, yes.
Yes, it's been a real joy actually to connect up with people, and yeah, a real pleasure and privilege to speak to people. Yeah, there's a lot of hard work going on in communities, small communities, to keep Jewish community life going.
So you're right, Rebecca. I mean, people do, wonder, is life going to be sustainable? Are you going to be able to keep the status quo? Is it going to change? Is it in fact going to, is the demographic, the younger, the older, the middle-aged, are those numbers going to change in a different way? And I know I've seen a certain number of young families come up from London and see the advantage of having a better quality of life by moving to Sheffield, where there's a community where you can be, very observant, you can be Shomer Shabbos and have a full Jewish life. And even if it means, you have one butcher for half a morning a week rather than every, 6 days a week, you can still have that Jewish life. And is it possible, like you said, in Newcastle, there is a strong community there, and of course there's a thriving hub over the water in Gateshead of Talmud Torah going on. And is it possible, like Fiona has done in Lancaster, for one Jewish person to say, surely there are more Jews here, and then to go out and find them and to actually create a brand new community from nothing, where probably there was no Jewish community, there was no legacy of one there, although there are legacies of Jewish communities in Cumbria, Barrow and Furness, and the whole of the Lake District is populated by people who are Jewish and live there, but perhaps belong to a synagogue in Manchester. And so you know, our project, Connecting Small Histories, is connecting those, and we've heard them today, you know, from Anna, putting the skin on those stories. You know, who knew that Anna's family were involved in those windows in Grimsby?
Mm-hmm.
And it's recording those stories, bringing that personal aspect to it, and then understanding what the economic and cultural impact is that the Jewish life, Jewish living has had in these areas. Sometimes now that it's gone, you know, like Sunderland, the huge Sunderland diaspora that lives all over the world, but not in Sunderland, apart from one or two people. And, you know, what is the richness that drew people there, and what has led them to not be there anymore? And it's usually the economics of the country, as we know. And as the economic situations change, so the population moves and finds a way to sustain itself somewhere else. There's been quite a few things in the chat. You know, people wanting to connect, and you know, we hope more people are going to connect through this reading festival and through our project as well. And I think I'm looking forward. We've spoken before. We put on this presentation this morning. We had a great discussion with you and Aviva at Jewish Renaissance about how Jewish Renaissance and Jewish Small Communities Network can work more closely together and do things. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. Would you like to open it up to the room a bit more and see whether anybody else has got any comments?
That would be
you can
great.
take the screen share off and everybody can see one another. I'm going to go to Gillian, because you mentioned Southport. And there's the story there, and both Gillian and I are born and brought up in Southport. Gillian is still there. I'm in Manchester. And the histories, I mean, it's a shame that we've not got Adrian and Lainey online this morning, because you feature one of the little adverts from Fletcher's shop, and Adrian is a Fletcher. And
Really?
worked in that business.
That advert, yeah.
Yes.
And they were sort of competitors with my family, and we had another ladies' fashion couturier shop, which was just a few doors down on Law Street. And Gillian, would you like to sort of chip in with your memories from your childhood and what you knew about, you know, the history of Southport there?
Indeed. Well, on my mother's side, they came to Southport from Liverpool during the war. And on my father's side, he came from Slovakia in 1938 and met my mother in Liverpool and through the family. So that was how the war, I guess, like for so many people, brought folk to the town, and that was really the growth of the town between the wars. And certainly Second World War had a big effect on bringing people. And Jewish people in the town have always contributed professionally and commercially to the life of the town. Still today, magistrates, deputy lieutenant. Nowadays, people can play in any of the golf clubs, which wasn't always the case. We have associations with Liverpool and Manchester, of course, and we have interfaith groups, and the Holocaust Memorial Day event is certainly an interfaith event. And we have an infrastructure where we can accept anybody, in as much as we've got beautiful shuls, a Reform as well as the Orthodox. We haven't got any schools, rather we haven't got a Jewish school, but of course there are good schools. We now, because of the corona, we have regular food delivery, so that wouldn't present a problem. We have a mikveh at Arnside Road at the Southport Hebrew Congregation. And certainly even this week, I've seen quite a lot of Frum people walking around after Tisha B'Av, coming for their holidays. So everything is in place for people to come and live here. Lovely properties, the beach. You know, it's a very pleasant place. And I think since COVID, I've looked at it with different eyes, because one has always been travelling and bobbing around, and really since March we've all been home-based, and realising how fortunate we are to have a very attractive town with lots of fresh air and greenery. So those certainly are the positive points.
Indeed.
You do wonder. I was just going to say, you do wonder in these times of COVID whether people will be thinking freshly or newly about places to live.
Yes.
Maybe this will be a time of resurgence of a younger Jewish life in some areas, possibly.
Yes, it's possible, isn't it? Of course, that is the problem with young people. It's the work, it's what they would do, how they would find jobs, and that's the driving force. But things change, work patterns change. We could never have foreseen this. And I think we've just got to be as welcoming and provide as much as we possibly can, and make our towns and centres attractive.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to mention that if anybody's got any stories, I mean, I can see sort of people bursting with stories on the screen here, just sort of like itching to get in, and please do contribute. But you can also send those stories to us at JSCN for our heritage project. Just send it to heritage@jscn.org.uk, and we'll get in touch and we'll talk about your story. And can it be part of the Heritage Hub? Can it be part of one of our local areas that we're focusing on? The areas are Sunderland and Cumbria and St Anne's and Eastbourne and Somerset and Bradford. And some of you are already involved in that here and have become volunteers, either volunteering your story or volunteering to collect those stories. So it's been great. We've had lots of people from London volunteering as to help collect those stories and to look for them and to write them down. And we've had other people who are just bursting with the histories of these places. And I'm discovering that I'm bursting with the histories of these places as well. when Rebecca, when you put up that advert from Fletcher's, I'm thinking, well, there's my family's, artifacts, which are just sitting behind me here, waiting to come out of boxes as we move back into our house. But Nikki, you've mentioned Swansea down there. What's your connection with Swansea? Go on, tell us.
I'm born from Swansea. I'm a bit of a mongrel. But I was born in Swansea. I live in Swansea, and it's very rainy here, and my window's open, and it's going all over my fresh clothes. My father was a lot older than my mum, so he came over in the 70s, I think, and met my mum in the 80s, and there was me.
So it's really interesting because obviously Swansea are our partners, Swansea University are our partners in connecting small histories and ensuring sort of Jewish heritage. It's interesting. Lawrence is over in Cardiff, and JR's not been to Cardiff yet, or have you, Rebecca?
Well, I was just about to say, we did cover Wales before I was editor, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And it's definitely somewhere we'll be going back to soon, because there are great things going on in Merthyr Tydfil. I don't know if people
Yes,
know
I have heard. I've heard rumour.
Yeah, so the old synagogue there, which is an amazing structure, it looks like some fairy tale.
It does.
Castle. Really
it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are getting funding. They have funding now to turn it into a community hub. I don't think it will go back to being a synagogue, but it's certainly going to be a heritage centre and have part of it as use with the wider community, telling the Jewish story and other immigration stories, I think. So that is all going on, and it's pretty exciting. I think actually it's going to be a centre for Jewish history in Wales.
Yes, it is. It's going
right?
To take the model that's in Glasgow at the Scottish Jewish Archive, and make the Welsh Jewish Archive based in that building. And I was talking to the CEO of Jewish Heritage Foundation, who have done the work, Michael Mail. And yes, that's exactly. So they bought the building. They're now raising the funding to refurbish it, to get it into a safe condition, which is what's going on at the moment, to stop it falling down. And that's their plan for it, is to put the Jewish archive there. And they've been consulting with people probably like Lawrence. Lawrence, has he been consulting with you?
Yeah, well, they actually started work a couple of weeks ago to make the building waterproof and weatherproof. So they're making progress. I'm a trustee of an organisation called the South Wales Jewish Historical Society, and we have.
Have we spoken before, Lawrence?
Sorry?
Have we spoken before? Possibly.
I wouldn't be surprised, but if you're asking me to remember, forget it. We've got a number of different types of grants. We've got a lottery heritage grant, which was very successful, and we have a young lady who is our director, a lady called Claudia. She does organizes the volunteers, does the research, and we occupy some space within the Glamorgan archives. Unfortunately, COVID has put that space under threat because the newly appointed director is concerned about who may be wandering in and out of the building. I'm not even sure whether they're going to allow the public back in, but certainly they don't want our volunteers popping in, but wait and see. We managed recently to get an extension from the National Heritage Lottery Fund as a result of COVID, because some of the projects that we were doing were automatically closed down because of COVID. We no longer had access to the museum in Aberdare or the museum in Pontypridd, where we were assisting and helping to look at their archives and to try and explain to them what they had. So that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Lawrence. That's great to have that.
Thank you.
Update on what's going on there. And so I think we're sort of, it's 20 past 11. We're billed for like an hour and a half. So I think, it'd be worth just going to maybe a couple more people around the room. I can see that people had to go off to other meetings because it's a very busy Zoom world these days. But I want to tip over, because we've not spoken about Northern Ireland. Rebecca, have you been over to Ireland or to Northern Ireland?
No, I haven't. We have covered Ireland. I'm pretty sure Janet Levin, who was the editor before I was, covered Ireland. Possibly not Northern Ireland, but again, it's a place that I've been hearing bits about the heritage of, and I'm interested in covering very much. So do we have someone here from Northern Ireland who could...
Well, we've got Michael Black, who
Hello, Rebecca.
Chair of Belfast Hebrew Congregation.
Oh.
Hi, Michael.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
Yes, we're busting with history here. In fact, just the other day, I got word that our previous synagogue, which is in a pretty sad state, is owned by the health service, and they're trying to get, as a development fund, are going to get some money, hopefully, to resurrect the building and give us some space in that for our history. So that's quite exciting.
I think you have a synagogue of architectural interest, don't you?
We've two. That one is listed, and the one we have at the moment, it was opened in 1964, is also a listed building, but very, not like the traditional synagogues, very modern. Yeah. And within that, I could just want to mention that we have an organization called Jews Smooze, and we bring Jewish music, Jewish, anything cultural to the wider community. And not that long ago, we put on a play in the Belfast Festival, and I got an award. And the play was then taken to America, to an Irish arts festival, and it won. It was put on in a synagogue in Manhattan. It was based on the history of some of the families that came to Belfast many years ago. So we have a Jewish gentleman who's resting up in the Belfast jail. He was hanged there. We have another gentleman who's resting up in our cemetery, who was captured and tortured by the IRA in the 1920s, and his body was exhumed and brought to the cemetery in Belfast. So, as I say,
colourful histories there, Michael.
Yeah?
Some colourful histories.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more, so maybe we can be in touch after this. I was going to say to anybody, I was going to speak a bit about Cambridge, because I saw Marilyn Fersch was also with us. We don't have time to go into it now, but we've covered many places. So if you're interested in what our archives have, then do be in touch with me. But also, if we have a look at our website, and you can see on the bit that is a passport, it says passport, it's an icon that keeps changing, and it goes through all the countries that we've covered in 20 years. We have a whole archive of that history. If you subscribe to JR, you can actually get access to those archives. But what I'm also keen to hear from, as with Michael, is places where you haven't covered. So I'd love to be in touch with you. Let me know. You can do it via Ed, perhaps.
Ed would know Stephen Jaffe. He's spoken, hasn't he?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
He would be our first port of call, because he's done a lot of local research, and maybe Ed could put Rebecca in touch with Stephen.
Of course I can. Yes. I was speaking to Stephen just in the last couple of days. So yes. Thanks, Michael. And I don't think we've got time to go into it, but Michelle, who's in Liverpool, just put on one of her. Oh, I can't see where the thing is. Oh, here we go. She's saying that her uncle told her about the pogrom in Tredegar, that his family were actually involved in that, where there were the Tredegar riots in Wales. And that's quite a landmark bit of history, when the local population rose up against the Jews, and the Jews managed, the local population very close to where the Jewish people were living actually defended them, I think. My history is a bit shaky there. Oh, go on, Michelle.
His little brother actually fell off the cart when they were fleeing. My uncle was Reverend Sam Wolfson, the Chazan at Greenbank Synagogue in Liverpool. And it was really weird this. He had a major stroke. He was living in Bournemouth. And I was a history teacher, and I'd went to see him because I'd been at a 2-week course in London on history. And I'd heard from Gerard Alderman, that's his name, isn't it, the historian, about the pogrom. And I said, Uncle Sam, you've never told me. You know I'm a history teacher. You've never told me this story. And although he couldn't speak properly, it suddenly all came out. And the most stunning thing was his little baby brother fell off the cart, and the local minister picked the baby up and kept the baby safe till they got back to Tredegar. Wow. It was fascinating.
That's the story. Amazing. Amazing. Sharon Hassan has just said that she is in Cambridge, so we've had 2 Cambridge people here today, but maybe that's another day. And Rebecca, we'll have you back, and we'll have another chat about more histories, I should think.
Yes, indeed. As I say, we did a big section on Cambridge, lots of lovely and very colourful history there as well. And Oxford is another recent one, Brighton, and then we'll go way back. So sorry if I haven't been able to cover your community today, but hopefully we can do this again and find out about these other places.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking more. I'm going to say thank you to everybody for coming today. I'm going to give you a flag up for this evening, because we've got another fabulous talk in our reading festival. So Monday mornings at 10 o'clock, Monday evenings at 7 o'clock. And tonight it's Pam Fox, who's written a number of fascinating histories. She's quite a prolific author on articles and books. And that's going to be a great talk this evening. 7 o'clock, you need to do a separate registration if you want to come to that. We've got a number of people registered already for that talk this evening. So each one of them is going to be, you just follow the link through, either from the event booking or through the link that I sent you out in direct email, just to register on Zoom and get on there with your own name on it. And we're going to be talking about those histories. So thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you especially to Rebecca for taking us those walkthrough on the very, very rich coverage that Jewish Renaissance has done on the northern communities. And I'm sure people were going, but you didn't include me. So, you know, I'm sure you're going to revisit and there'll be different things for you to do. We can't all do everything all the time, but even getting one small little foot planted and saying, you know, there is Jewish life here, or there was Jewish life and there is Jewish culture still there because of it, is an amazing thing. And thank you very much for doing that. I wasn't aware of those things until we chatted about it, but I think we're going to talk more, aren't we? So fantastic. Thank you everybody for coming. That's a wrap for this morning. Hopefully I shall see all of you back this evening, and if not this evening, then next Monday. Please go onto the JSCN website, jscn.org.uk. There's a button on the front page. It says Reading Festival, and you can click through to see the programme for the whole of the month, every Monday. Goodbye for now. See you tonight.
Goodbye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rebecca.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Lovely to see everybody. Cheers. Bye.